Alright, now we're ready for question 13, which asks us if this particular book in our hands is part of a series or a set of related works. As we can remember from our guidelines, if there's perhaps a curriculum series, so you have Let's Learn Grade 1, Let's Learn Grade 2, Let's Learn Grade 3, that may have been developed by a publisher, then you would click yes. Or if it's any part of a series that you happen to know about this, it may not be obvious from the cover of the book itself, in which case you can click unknown, or if you know for sure it's just a single title that's not related to any series, you can click unknown, or click no, whichever. Alright, so 14a is a very important question that's going to affect a lot of other questions in the remainder of the survey. And that's basically, is this a primer or a primer as some people pronounce it, or a reading textbook, which are basically the same thing, or related material. So material designed to be used as a textbook either in a formal classroom or an informal classroom setting. Or is it completely non-textbook and supplementary? So let's look at some examples of what it would obviously be a textbook. It's our Kiswahili textbook that we saw earlier. When you look at this, you can see it's very textbook-like. It's got lessons. Here we're looking at the introduction to certain letters, texts for them to read, comprehension questions, etc. So this would easily fall into the category of textbook. You may have some primers that were designed for non-formal settings that may be used in a classroom setting, even if they're not sanctioned by the government. It does not have to be officially sanctioned to count as a textbook, but something that you could use kind of like a textbook to teach reading, specifically to teach reading. Some of our other options that would go under related material would include teacher's manuals, as we can see here. Get this into your line of sight here. It may actually say teacher's manual right directly on it, but you see things like lesson plans that would go with probably a student manual, although not always a student textbook. So something for the teacher, particularly for teaching reading. And it may be a broader subject, language arts, where you have a little bit more than just learning how to read. That's fine as long as reading is an important component. You could also consider workbooks that would accompany probably a student textbook. Here's again an example from Kenya. What we call a workbook would be where the child is actually writing exercises in the book, and it's supposed to be writing in the book. You may have tracing letters or filling in blanks or doing puzzles or whatever. So this would be a workbook that is supporting reading. The last kind of related material would be a decodable book. There's a lot of information about this in your guidelines with lots of examples, so I won't go into those now. It's a little bit complicated, but we gave you lots of examples for how to recognize what is a decodable book. So these are the four categories that you would see under reading textbook or related material. The textbook for the pupil, a workbook for the pupil, a teacher's manual, or a decodable book. So if we say this is, then it's going to ask us, is it labeled for a particular level? From the publisher, does the publisher suggest that it's labeled for a certain level or not? So you can look on there and see, for example, class 1 is right there on the front, so we would be able to say yes, it is. They may not use the words class 1, class 2, so basically the equivalent of primary grade 1, primary grade 2, preschool or nursery, grade 4. We won't be going above grade 4. It may be labeled something completely different, like beginner, intermediate, or advanced, or book 1, or whatever. If it is labeled something different that you think is not the equivalent of these actual formal class distinctions,